Hi guys, Olive here today to review two nonfiction books that I have recently read that are both about language. The first book I'll be reviewing in this video was written by a very well-known nonfiction writer. That book is called Mother Tongue, English and How It Got That Way by Bill Bryson. This book is an exploration of the English language, but in order to take us on that journey, Bill Bryson first gives us a larger context about the development, the structure, as well as the continuous transformation of languages in general. If you hadn't noticed, English is a really weird language. It's highly inconsistent. It often behaves like a magpie in that it steals bits and pieces from other languages. And it is robust to the point of being intimidating since it contains so many different words. In fact, some people have claimed that the English language has more words than any other language on earth. It is all of these facts combined that make English so challenging to learn, but also so interesting to learn about. It's more relevant than ever to be learning about English since it is quickly becoming the unofficial global language. But although English speaking is growing more common across the world, mainly due to the complications of having numerous languages in our increasingly globalized world, most people are choosing to speak the language out of necessity more than out of a desire to learn it. People do still much prefer to speak in their native languages, but there's no denying that more of the world is at one's fingertips if you choose to speak English. We can even see it here on BookTube, where English is by far the dominant language, even though I have seen quite a few different BookTubers who choose to speak in their native languages. So if English is a language that a good portion of us spend our time hearing and speaking, I think it's helpful as well as intriguing to learn more about it. And that was my motivation to pick this book up. Before Bill Bryson goes into the English specific details, he first talks about languages in a more generalized way, and first talks about how words are created, which he says happens in one of 6 different ways. Number 1, by adding to them. Number 2, by subtracting from them. Number 3, by making them up. Number 4, by doing nothing to them. Number 5, by saying other words in error. And number 6 is by borrowing them from other languages. I should note that the first 4 in that list were actually proposed by a linguist who is cited by Bill Bryson in this book, but the last 2 are Bill Bryson's own additions. I should also note that this book does not scrimp on examples and gives plenty of them when it comes to supporting those last 2 methods of word creation. My favorite example in this entire book is actually one that Bill Bryson uses to support his idea that some words are created in error, because for 200 years, the very expensive vegetable that we know as asparagus was known as sparrowgrass before a flub turned it into the word that we know today. And certainly there is no lack of examples of English borrowing things from other countries: shampoo from India, ketchup from China, potato from Haiti, the list goes on and on. And so many words die out as well, including ones whose counterparts we still see and use today. And then there have been changes in spelling, pronunciation, and meaning, and the origin stories of some of these transformations are simultaneously unbelievable and also so obvious that you won't believe they never occurred to you before. Even well-known grammar rules have odd and frankly arbitrary origins. That whole rule that you can't end a sentence in a preposition, it was because some old guy preferred it that way, said so, and it eventually morphed into something to be enforced. The fact that English, unlike some other languages, doesn't have any kind of an academy policing its usage or its structure allows it to continue to be usable and fluid. It allows it to be able to continue to transform, and thus it's able to maintain relevancy in our changing times. Reading this book helps you see how English has become what it is today. It makes you see just how much by happenstance we've ended up with this melting pot of a language. And because you can see how much it has changed over the years, it makes you a lot less married to the concept of proper English. When you really sit down and think about it, a lot of the ways that we say things often defy our own grammar rules. For instance, why do we say you were instead of you was? Why does you, a singular noun, take the plural in the past tense? It shouldn't, except that a snooty pants of yore thought it sounded more elegant that way. So that's the way we do it now. Languages in general make no sense. They are full of nuances, they are constantly growing and changing, and their proper use is entirely subjective. And because languages are constantly changing, some people have speculated that English may eventually branch off into different sub-languages, but Bill Bryson argues, and I do agree with him, that this is unlikely to happen due to advanced communications and the long arm of mass media that's acting as a binding agent. In fact, we're actually more at risk of all the different global languages becoming more homogenous with the increasing borrowing from each other's languages and the increasing use of English worldwide. This was a really great book. It's one of Bill Bryson's earlier works, so it doesn't have the fully formed style or humor that you can feel in his later books, but you can definitely see it developing when you read this book. Although many of his later books deal with his own personal experiences, specifically his travels, you can see in this book that he is infinitely capable of writing a book that demands a lot of research and perspective that this kind of a book needs. Overall, this is a fantastic book on language that I can recommend to those who've never picked up a book like it before, or those like myself who have read other books on language in the past. But one topic that is covered in the mother tongue, albeit very briefly, is swearing. I held off on mentioning that until now because the next book that I would like to review discusses that topic at length. That book is called What the F? What Swearing Reveals About Our Language, Our Brains, and Ourselves by Benjamin K. Bergen. Love it or hate it, people swear. And whether you call it swearing, cursing, cussing, using profanity, vulgarity, dirty words, bad words, you're talking about the same thing. In this book, Benjamin Bergen proposes that there are 4 different types of swear words. There are those that deal with religion, with sex or sex acts, with bodily function, and then there is the most offensive in most people's opinions, including my own, slurs. These 4 categories remain surprisingly consistent throughout pretty much every global language, with the exception of Japanese, which has no curse words for whatever reason. But most languages do have words that are considered indecent, but they do tend to be unequally distributed across these 4 categories, depending on what country we're talking about. And speaking of country-specific things, they are also unevenly used and policed in different countries. Here in the United States, for example, content is highly censored in just about every different type of media, with these agencies levying massive fines for breaking rules that often aren't even written down anywhere. There's no denying that use of profanity is a very hot-button issue, but the author in this book is not just interested in the controversy, he's interested in the science behind them. For instance, the author talks about where in the brain swear words are stored, which is actually a different part of the brain where normal language processing is done. This is why people who have had specific, very traumatic brain injuries are still able to use curse words, even though they can't use any other words. And as you probably know just from your own intuition, they are highly tied to emotion. There are studies that show that using them can be cathartic when you are getting out that energy when using a curse word. And there's also studies to show that they can potentially be pain relieving and that you don't feel pain as much if you swear after getting hurt. But what you might not know is that they also elicit an emotional response in the person hearing them. Your heart rate accelerates and your breathing becomes more shallow. But if they're just words, why do they have the power that they do? Why do they need to be bleeped out or avoided in the media that we consume? What about them makes them bad? In this book, Benjamin Bergen doesn't just seek to cover the origins or the different uses of profanity, but also tries to figure out whether or not there's something about the words themselves that seems to upset us. Is it the way they sound? Is it the number of letters that they contain? The answer to this is that while some of the swear words in the English language at least do have some structural similarities, the reason that they are offensive is that they refer to taboos. There are some things that we as humans would rather not think about or rather not talk about. So if there is a word that refers to one of those things, the word itself becomes taboo. And furthermore, the more people believe that that word is taboo, the more taboo it becomes. And the fact that they're taboo makes people more averse to hearing them. It happens even here on BookTube. I've seen several different commenters get on creators' cases for using swear words in a video. And while people hate the word moist pretty universally, I'm pretty confident that I could use that word in a video and not get critiqued on my ladylikeness. And it's not just viewers. YouTube has even started to demonetize videos that they consider not advertiser friendly. And one of the ways it could be not advertiser friendly, swearing in the video. The belief that bad language shouldn't be used is a moral one, and it is both culturally and personally relative. Bergen rightfully points out in this book that there were plenty of words that were extremely offensive in the past, but that are completely tame now, and the words that we consider very offensive will likely follow this same route and be completely innocuous in the future. So this begs the question, why are we shielding ourselves from them? I know that many people would probably answer that question by saying, because children shouldn't hear them. And it seems that it is a very common belief that hearing swear words will somehow negatively impact a child's development. However, there is no science to support this. It also seems to be a common belief here in the United States that the use of swear words in a household is demonstrative of an abusive household. But I think at this point it's incredibly important to say that it is not the language that is used, but the way language is used, the intent behind it. As the author says in the book, it's hard to imagine what harm is likely to come from telling an adolescent his report card is fucking fantastic. Compare that with telling him, you're stupid and I hate you. You can use profanity positively and you can use clean language abusively. And this is where it's important to note that Benjamin Bergen makes a point to distinguish slurs from the other 3 different types of swear words that he defines earlier in the book. Slurs, by definition, were designed with malicious intent and are almost always used to other a group of people. Of all the different types of swearing, it should be those and those alone that we find offensive. And yet this becomes so much of a complex and sensitive subject when you consider that when words are banned, they are given even more power. For me, that was one of the most thought-provoking sections of this book. In summary, swearing is a very interesting subcategory of language. In English, at least, curse words have a grammar that is entirely their own. They are constantly in flux and changing meaning, just like every other part of a language. But they also have this power to elicit great emotion out of both the speaker and the listener. I did think that this was a very enjoyable read. Probably not something I'll ever feel compelled to reread, but I certainly learned a lot from it. I thought that Benjamin Bergen handled the subject matter with the blunt honesty, but also the humor and sensitivity that it needed to be done well. I do have to say, though, that even though I am someone who is very comfortable with hearing and saying swear words, reading them over and over again, page after page, did get a little overwhelming. Not surprising considering these are taboo words in my culture. Additionally, I did have someone comment on my July TBR where I mentioned I would be reading this book, and that person said that they listened to this book on audio and would not particularly recommend it considering it was just someone swearing at you for hours. Just something to keep in mind if you want to pick this book up. So those were my thoughts on these 2 books that I have recently read on language. I would love to hear from you in the comment section below if you're interested in reading these books, if you have read these books and have thoughts you'd like to share with me, or if you have any recommendations of other books on language that you think that I would enjoy. If you would prefer to get in touch with me somewhere other than YouTube, I will leave links to all of my social media profiles in the description box below. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video. Bye.